Okay. So to start with, uh, today I have received many WhatsApp messages and Telegram messages saying to postpone the training because most of the participants will be busy. But since we are having a very tight schedule and we have to complete the training by next week, so I am continuing the training today as well, even though the participants are less. So last week or yesterday, what we have covered is we have seen how we can configure a Windows EC2 instance. We have seen how we can log into the Windows EC2 instance by decrypting the password from the access key. After that, we have created a custom AMI from the snapshot. Okay. We have seen how we can launch an instance from the custom AMI. After that is complete, we have seen the concept of ALB or elastic load balancer. We have seen how many types of load balancers are there. There are 4 types of load balancers. That is classic load balancer, application load balancer, and network load balancer. And a recent load balancer which was introduced on May 2021, that is gateway load balancer. Gateway load balancer is not part of this course, but I will share you the documents with the help of which you can configure the gateway load balancer. Uh, we have seen how we can configure a classic load balancer. So classic load balancer basically is a load balancer which divides or which load balance the traffic between number of EC2 instances equally. Okay, so the loads are distributed equally via the round robin algorithm. We have seen how we can configure two EC2 instance within a classic load balancer, and we have seen once a EC2 instance is particular hit with a particular is there is a hit in the particular load balancer, it is getting transferred to a particular EC2 instance, and the second hit when it is coming, it is transferring the packet to the next EC2 instance. So that's a 50 piece 50 load balancing we have seen. We have configured network load balancers. We have seen the concept of network load balancers. So network load balancers is actually a load balancer which is used in case where we are receiving multi-million network requests, maybe a NTP server or maybe a DNS server where we are getting multi-million requests. So the main difference between a network load balancer and an application load balancer is network load balancer only works on a TCP and a UDP port, whereas in case of application load balancer, we can work on HTTP and HTTPS. We will see how we can configure a application load balancer today in a hands-on lab. And after that, we have seen the port redirection and how we can redirect a particular port to a network load balancer. So these are the topics which were covered yesterday. So any questions on yesterday's topics? Okay, fine. So as we start, let me start with the concept of the application load balancer. Let me reiterate what are the things that we have seen in an application load balancer or in a network load balancer. So in a network load balancer, what we have done is that we have created the most important thing in creating a or in configuring a network or application load balancer is the TGT, okay, or the target group. So target group is actually a container which holds all the listeners, all the EC2 instances which you want to do a load balancing. The health checking are not done in the TG. The health checking are not done in the EC2 instances, like the health checking is done in case of a classic load balancer. The health checking is actually done on the TGT instances itself. So TGT actually does the health check, and once the health check is healthy, then we can route the traffic to different EC2 instances. And in case of NLB, we have seen that it only works on ports, it only works on a TCP and a UDP port. Apart from that, if you want to go for a logic on a different kind of a logic, like suppose a particular once a user is hitting a particular port or sorry particular path, maybe a particular URL, that particular URL will redirect the load to a different EC2 instance. And if the URL is different, then it will be transferring the traffic to another EC2 instance. So that's the part of the application load balancer. So in order to do that, let me draw this. So what is an ALB or application load balancer? So it actually works on port, okay? It works on the HTTP port, okay, or the HTTPS port. And we can define different logic on this particular load balancer. So let me draw the particular architecture that we will be defining here. So suppose we have created two EC2 instance, okay, or rather I should say not two EC2 instance, we have created two target groups, okay. So these are all target groups. Inside that particular target group, what we have done is that we have defined multiple EC2 instance under that particular target group, okay. So there are multiple EC2 instance which is defined in the target group, okay. So there are multiple EC2 instance. Now suppose there is a high-end EC2 instance, like say maybe a C5 instance which is configured here, and you are having a video editing software with the help of which you does video editing, and this particular video editing software is actually a web-based software, and you want that any user, okay, any user which actually hits the or which actually tries to access this video editing software will automatically route this packet to this particular high-end EC2 instance, that is the C5, okay. So let me give it a different kind of a scenario. Suppose someone is actually hitting slash app, okay. Then once someone is hitting slash app, it will be redirected to a particular instance, okay. Slash app or maybe slash application. So if the endpoint is slash app or slash application, now when I'm talking about endpoint, what do you mean by that? When I'm talking about an endpoint, I want to mean by that, like say www.example.com/app. So this is the endpoint slash app. So if someone is actually trying to browse this particular site or trying to browse this particular endpoint, he will be redirected to a particular site, or maybe application, he will be redirected to a particular site. At the same time, since it's a high-end application, it will be redirected to the high-end high-end server. Now at the same time, because you need high-end resources in order to work or in order to what I can say, like since it's a high-end application, since it's a high-end video editing application, so that application need much more resources. So we are redirecting that particular traffic to a resourceful EC2 instance, okay. At the same time, suppose someone is trying to access slash blog, okay. Now since someone is trying to access slash blog, and blog is not a high resource utilized instance, so you are trying to redirect it to a particular EC2 instance, okay. So that means if someone is actually trying to access slash blog, okay, so we will see that we will be redirecting it to a different instance. So in order to understand how we can do it, let's see, like we have already are having a WordPress instance and we are having a Tomcat instance, okay. So what we will do is that say, just let me just revise it. So we are having a Tomcat instance here and a WordPress instance here, okay. So what we will do is that we will configure an application load balancer, and we will say that if a user is trying to access the endpoint slash app or slash application, that particular endpoint will be automatically redirected to the Tomcat instance. Okay. And if someone is trying to access slash blog, it will be redirected to the WordPress instance. Now, apart from this logic of defining this path logic, so we call this as a path logic. Okay. So apart from defining this path logic, we can also define a source. So the source query can also be defined. Like if the source is coming from Facebook, then it will be redirected to a particular instance. Okay. Or maybe if the source is actually coming from Twitter, okay, if the source is coming from Twitter, we will be redirecting that to a different instance. So that we can also define. Not only that, we can also define that if the target or the source IP address is something like in a particular subnet, we can redirect it those users. Like suppose you will, in a multi-tier architecture, you will be having users who are working from internet. You will be having users who are working from internet, right? So you can define the logic in such a way that if the packet is coming from your internal network, then they will be redirected to a particular EC2 instance or for a particular target group. And if the traffic is coming from the internet, from outside the network, it will be redirected to a different target group. Okay. So likewise, we will be defining different target groups out here, and we will be seeing how we can do it, do the application load balancer configuration. Now, in order to do the application load balancer configuration, let's go back. Excuse me. Let's go back to our EC2 instance. So let's see if what are the servers which are currently running. Okay, so we have WordPress Tomcat Joomla is running, and we have Windows machine is also running. Fine. So we will be using this WordPress and the Tomcat for this ALB. So in order to do it, what we have to do, we have to first define the target groups. Okay. So in order to define the target groups, let's see. So we have already target group defined. Let me see if there is any load balancer defined. No, there is no load balancer. So let's delete this target groups. Okay. Now let's create a new target group. So for the target group, let's see, this will be a WordPress ALG target group. Okay. So it will be on HTTP and port 80. Okay. We will be using all the VPCs. Okay. The protocol check will also be going, health check will be done from the HTTP end. Click on next. Okay. So let's add the WordPress one first. Include as pending below. Okay. Click on create target group. Now my WordPress ALG target group is created. Let's create another target group known as Tomcat ALB TG. Okay. Same thing here. Click on next. Then go to Tomcat, select include as pending below, and then click on create target group. Okay. So now we have two target groups already created, one for the Tomcat and one for the WordPress. Now let's go back to the load balancer section and click on create load balancer. Okay. Now in load balancer, we will be selecting create application load balancer. Okay. Let's give it a name as application. Okay. It will be definitely internet facing, and the listeners will be HTTP. You can also add several other listeners like HTTPS. Okay. These are the availability zones from which we are going to select the target groups. Okay. Now, suppose this target groups is very important in selecting. You need to select this target groups because in this VPCs, because suppose you have created one VPC in US East 2C and you haven't selected this option. So once we will try to add those target groups which are assigned in the East 2C, we will be unable to get it. Okay. So for that reason, we are selecting all the available zones which is available within the VPC. Okay. Then click on next, configure security settings. So we don't need, okay, so let's uncheck HTTPS. For that reason it is asking me for a certificate. Next, click on configure security settings. Okay, create a new security group. So we have a custom TCP, so it will be going to anywhere over the port 80. Okay, click on next, configure routing. Now here the routing is, you can create a new target group directly from here, or you can create existing target group. Okay, so let's first add the WordPress target group. Okay, click on register targets, next review, and click on create, close. Now your application load balancer is created. Now if you guys remember, in the network load balancer we have option to add a, listeners, right? But in application target group there is a new option which has come up now, which is view edit rules. So here we will be defining all the policies and all the logic based on, means when I'm talking about logic, we are talking about like, if the endpoint is app, it will be going to a Tomcat group. If the endpoint is blog, it will be going for a WordPress group. We will be defining all this logic. So in order to define this logic, click on view and edit rules. Okay. Now it is already given that if the target group, if the port is 80 or the protocol is HTTP, and if the default port is selected, it will go to the WordPress target group. Okay. Now click on add, click on insert rule. Now click on add condition. In the add condition, you click on path. Okay. Now in the path, you just give slash app or slash application. Okay, so what we have seen is that if it is slash app or slash application, it will be going to the Tomcat. Okay, then go to add action, click on forward to. Where it will be forwarded? It will be forwarded to Tomcat. Okay, you can also create a distribution of load inside it. Like if you want that 50% or 60% of the load which will be coming via this app and the application, it will be going to the Tomcat, then you can write 60% out here. Okay, and then can select another target group and can distribute the next load over here. So your 100% load is actually distributed between Tomcat and WordPress. That is also possible. So let's go for the one only in order to understand it. So if someone is trying to access the ALB DNS with that of an endpoint slash app, it will be automatically redirected to my Tomcat ALB. Okay, click on save. I think someone is on mute. Can you unmute, please? Yep. Okay. So if it is redirected to slash app or slash application, this will be automatically redirected to the Tomcat group. Click on save. Next, let add another rule out here. Click on insert rule. Let's add the blog one. Okay. Now, if the path is slash blog, okay, click on add action. Let's go for a fixed response. Okay, so it will get a 503, like you can define different response coded, like error code 200, error code 400, error code 503, and this error code will be defined with a HTML message. Okay, like if you want like if someone is trying to access the blog and you want to define, you want to give them an error message with a customized HTML, so you can define that. So let's just define a custom HTML out here. So let's define a simple center out here. Then let's define the h1 style equals to color equals to red. Okay. And here the error message will be blog section is still not available. Okay, close the H1, close the center. So this will be a simple HTML message. If someone is trying to access the blog, it will give that blog section is still not available. Okay, click on save. Click on save. So here we have defined three different rules. One is if someone is trying to access, by default he is trying to access the default DNS, it will automatically go to the WordPress group. Okay. If someone is trying to access the path with that of an endpoint of /app and /application, it will be automatically going to the Tomcat target group. And if someone is trying to access a blog, there will be a fixed response. Okay. Now let's go and let's see. Let's go to the description. Let's go to the DNS name, copy it. Let's open a new incognito window. Let's paste it. Okay, so you are redirected to the WordPress section. Okay, now let's define the endpoint /app. Now see, you can see that the load is redirected to Tomcat. But since in Tomcat we don't have any page defined named as app, for that reason it is showing me the error HTTP status 404 not found. But we can still define, we can still see that the load is actually defined or actually redirected to Tomcat. Okay. Now let's see if someone is trying to access blog. Can you see? Blog section is still not available. So we can now see that in front of an application load balancer, when we are defining certain logics and the logic is actually verified, the loads are now getting transferred to different target groups, and inside the target groups it is actually transferred to different instances. Okay, is it clear? Any question on this? Any question, Raju? Yeah, Abhijit. Yeah.
Actually, here we are talking about all the application is running, all the applications should be web-based, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to publish any application which is working on specific port, not a HTTP port, then we have to configure NLB, right? Not that ALB.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if it's a fat application, okay, if it's not a web-based application and a fat application, like say SQL Server, okay, so it's a fat application, and now when you are talking about SQL Server, so SQL Server is a database which will work in the backend, but in front there will be definitely an application which will be running, right? So in that case, what you can do, if that application is a web-based application, you can configure an application load balancer, configure the protocols and configure the other things which is there. Like if it is an HTTP or an HTTPS based application, you can configure the an application load balancer. And if the application works on a particular TCP and a UDP port, it can be any TCP and UDP port within the RFC standard, then you can definitely need to go for a NLB configuration.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So like even if you go there and even if you see, we can add many other rules as well, right? So like if I want to insert a rule and if I want to say that if the source query string is, if the SRC, that is the source, is FB, then do certain actions. Okay. Or maybe if the SRC is Twitter.
Will it understand the string
Yeah, it will understand the string because these are the,
FB is a colloquial term.
yeah, because uh, if you see, if you open facebook.com, and once you log in, it actually
FB does.
goes and hit the FB1. So these are
Okay.
the defined source which is defined by Amazon. Okay, so it actually works. But since we cannot show you it in a hands-on lab that the traffic is coming from a Facebook or traffic is coming from a Twitter, so I'm just showing you what will be the source and what will be the key for those sources. Okay. Now, even if the source is coming from
Okay.
Instagram, so the Instagram key is, this is the Instagram key, INSTGRN. So if you are giving a particular code, I will be sharing the link where it will give you the string source and the corresponding string that you can give. Then you can define something like, if you can say that redirect it to something else, okay, redirect it to a custom host, or maybe you can say that redirect forward this to a certain other target group. That is also possible. Not only that, if you see, there is a condition where you can define source IP. Okay. Now, if you say, so this is my source IP. Okay. So if you want that, you want to define if the source IP is this. Okay. So you have to give a CIDR. If the source IP is this, okay, then you can redirect it to support. Suppose now when we will be discussing about VPC, we will be in the next week. When we will be when we will be discussing about VPC, we will be defining private IPs and we will be defining public IPs. There also, in a multi-tier architecture, like the way, that is the way it will work. So you can define your private subnet out here, and you can say that if it's a private subnet, then redirect it to WordPress, and if it's a public subnet, then redirect it to something else. Okay. But in case of a private and a public subnet, you have to define two different rules, because in the application load balancer there is no concept of what I will say, and there is no and concept. Everything is or. So either this will be fulfilled or this will be fulfilled, then it will be added to this. So for defining a IP based logic, you have to define two different rules, one rule for the private and another rule for the public one. Okay. Is it clear now? Okay. Now I will not delete this because, okay, let me define one thing. Let me define a target group. Okay. Let's now start. Now, since application load balancers and other load balancers are now over, let's now start with a new topic which is known as auto scaling group or auto scaling. Okay. It is ASG, auto scaling group. So can anyone tell me how many types of auto scalings are there? Anyone is having any idea about how many types of auto scaling are there? Because the concept of auto scaling is same for all the cloud platforms. Okay. So there are two types of auto scaling. One is horizontal.
So you need to say that one, horizontal and vertical.
Yeah,
Oh, right,
exactly,
sorry.
exactly. One is horizontal auto scaling, and the second one is vertical. Okay. Now, let's see what happens in horizontal vertical scaling, and let's see what happens in vertical scaling. Suppose you have defined couple of EC2 instance. Okay. You have defined couple of EC2 instance out here. Okay. Now you want a logic that if the CPU usage percentage goes above 70%, then auto scaling will launch another EC2 instance automatically. Okay. This EC2 instance which the auto scaling will launch will contain the same configuration type which the primary instance is having. Not only that, it will be having the same configuration or application configuration which the primary one is having. So you may have a question in mind how that thing will happen. We will go deep into it. So this is auto scaling in with respect to horizontal. Okay. Now take a second scenario where you have two database servers. Okay. Here, what you have done is that if the memory usage percentage goes above 70%, okay, greater than 70%, then what auto scaling will do? What suppose this particular instance is having say 32 gig of memory, okay, 32 GB of memory. If the memory usage is more than 70%, vertical auto scaling will increase this 32 GB of memory to 64 GB. Okay. So now can you define, like if I want to know, give me a single line answer about the functionality of horizontal and vertical scaling. Can anyone give me? I need a single line answer where it will define the function of a horizontal and a vertical auto scaling, or maybe it will give me an idea about how horizontal and vertical scaling works. So
In
yeah.
single line, in single line, if I use the say analogy, suppose I am working in my office and looking after one territory, and if the this uh, boss assigned me another territory, so here I am the single person who is actually increasing who is actually taking the increased load and serve the purpose. Okay, here I am not using another guy or appoint another guy. In case of a horizontal thing, if the load increases, I can appoint another seller or another business guy in my team. Okay, so there the number of person will increase. In this case, the EC2 instances or the snapshots will not appear. They will not take any snapshot or create any. So it will be a single instance. So in case of a horizontal, the number of instances will be more. In case of a vertical scaling, it will be a single. It will be that instance only.
Yeah, it's the example is actually perfect example. Okay. But if I want a technical line, so can I say that horizontal scaling means increasing of instances without increasing the resources?
Yes.
Okay. Or to be on a specific side without increasing the instance resources. And for vertical scaling, it is increasing of
Instance resources.
resources without increasing instances.
Instance.
The reason behind this, I am writing this to you guys because this is a very common question in AWS exam. Okay, So this is a very common question where they will be asking you what is the difference between a horizontal and a vertical scaling, and there will be multiple choices and you have to select one. So just remember, in horizontal scaling, the scaling works in a horizontal manner. That means it works in a parallel manner. So it will be 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? In case of a vertical scaling, it just works like a step. Just a minute, guys. Okay. Sorry, guys. So in vertical scaling, the scaling happens like this. So it will be 1, 2, and a 3. Okay. Is it clear now? Okay.
The scaling is only increasing the storage or anything else
Exactly.
without
Exactly.
instances.
Exactly. So it will
Uh,
increase the resources of the same machine that you have put. So if you go back to my whiteboard, it will increase the resource of the same machine which you have created. So it will not increase the resource, it will not increase the instance numbers. And that is the reason,
it
that is
vertical
the,
is only meaning is storage.
no, vertical is
Only
only meaning storage means?
but vertical scaling is basically targeting this memory scaling, right?
No, not only memory scaling, it can increase the memory, it can increase storage, it can increase your CPU based on the logic that you will be defining inside the auto scaling group. It will increase like that way. Like if you want to increase the number of cores that you are using, that can also be done. If you want to increase the amount of memory that you are using, that can be also be done. And if you want to increase the storage, that can also be done.
Okay. Then in this horizontal this we can increasing this instances just like
Exactly.
however this is it depending on this computational
No, it is not
in
depending on, it is not depending on any computational thing. What it will do is
hmm,
that whatever the primary instance configuration that is there, okay. So
hmm,
if the primary instance configuration is T2 micro, okay, so it will increase it to T2 micro. It will just increase the T2. I mean, it will just create another T2 micro instance for you. Okay.
okay.
Now, and that is one of the reason our auto scaling groups only works on horizontal scaling and it doesn't works on a vertical scaling. Vertical scaling concept is only used in RDS because practically if you think uh, in case of an RDS means in case of a database, you cannot simply increase the instances of the database because if you are increasing the number of database instances, those database instances which you have increased needs to be synced as well, right? Because it will work as a primary and a secondary. So if you are creating another instance of your primary, so these primary and secondary needs to be synced. So there is no use of not only that, if you are increasing the number of instances as well, you have to take care of the licenses as well. So you guys may not be having an idea, but Avijita is having an idea. Avijita, keeping in view of like if you are deployed an SQL or maybe a Oracle server, so SQL and Oracle server is having core based licenses, right? So suppose
Right.
you have procured a 6 core SQL licenses. Okay. Now once you are using a horizontal scaling here, so your actual core number of cores get increased. So you have procured 6 core. Now auto scaling has increased it to another instance. So now you are having 12 core of licenses. So you will be facing issues with the cores as well. So for that reason, only vertical scaling is having the is only used in case of RDS relational database systems. In case of databases like MongoDB, SQL, Oracle, Sybase, whatever the database that you are working on. Okay. Now,
On top of that, I'd like to add something more. If there is any relation between if the application is monolithic, okay,
yeah,
then I think we should go with vertical scaling. If the application is not
exactly,
monolithic, then we can go for horizontal.
exactly. That is one of the point as well. Okay. So clear on this. Now let's go and see how we can define a auto scaling group. Okay. Now, before we define an auto scaling group, there is one important thing which is required. Here is auto scaling group. Okay. So before we go for an auto scaling group, there are certain things which is required. So in auto scaling group, in when we have defined an ELB, okay, when we have defined an ELB, do you remember that we have added instances? Like if you go to the target groups, if you see this, we have added targets, right? But in an actual scenario, that doesn't happen. In the actual scenario, auto scaling group will be the main owner who will be adding the targets, who will be adding instances inside the target groups. Okay, based on the policy that you are defining, auto scaling group will be the main owner or will be the driver who will be adding those instances inside the target groups. So in order to show that, let me delete this particular instance. Let me deregister this. Okay. So let the deregistration take some time. So it will take some time. Let it be. Now the main thing of a auto scaling group is what we say or what we call the main thing of auto scaling group. In order to define an auto scaling group, the first thing that we need to define is a LCT or launch configuration template. Okay. Now launch configuration template is actually the template or actually the configuration file with the help of which every time when an auto scaling group kicks, it will take the information and the configuration that you are configuring in a LCT template, and it will define the EC2 instance, or it will create the EC2 instance based on the policies or based on the configurations that you have done in the LCT. So LCT is one of the most important file in case of an auto scaling group, and without a LCT or without a launch configuration template, an auto scaling group cannot work. Okay, so let's see how it happens. Click on launch configuration. Okay, then click on create launch configuration. So let's give it a name as, like, suppose we will be scaling WordPress, so let's give it a name as WordPress LCT. Okay. Okay. Another thing is that in order to do a auto scaling group, like I told you in this scenario. Yeah. So I told you in this scenario that when the CPU usage goes to 70%, okay, then auto configuration or auto scaling will add a new instance out here. Okay. So how can the auto scaling group will identify which instance need to be kicked in? Means he need to deploy another instance. So what will be the OS of that instance? What will be the application of that instance? Because the configuration needs to be same. The primary server and the auto scaled server need to have the same configuration. So in order to do that, one thing that you need to define is you have to create a custom AMI. Okay. So let's go to our AMI section. Let's see whether we have any custom AMI or not. Yeah, we have one custom AMI for WordPress. Okay. And one is for Windows. So let's take this WordPress AMI and let's take this WordPress AMI inside the auto scaling group and let's create the launch configuration template. Okay. Now let's go to the launch configuration template wizard. Click on create launch configuration. Give it a name as WordPress config. Okay. Click on choose EMI. You have the WordPress custom EMI defined. Okay. Now choose the instance type. Click on choose instance. So here maybe your primary instance is on T2 micro. Okay. Your primary instance is on T2 micro. So you created T2 micro. Click on choose. Here you can select IAM role. If there is any IAM roles which are defined, you can also choose an IAM role. Not only that, if you have to have a spot instance, if you remember when we have started doing the EC2 purchasing options, we have seen that there is a purchasing option of spot instance. Okay, so you can also request a spot instance out here. So current spot instance, these are the spot instance which are currently present in your location. So we can also select a current spot instance and we can deploy the EC2 instance within the auto scaling group based on the spot instance. Okay. Then you can also create an EBS optimized instance, means whatever the configuration that you can define in an EC2 instance, the same configuration you have to define in the launch configuration template. Here you have defined the AMI, that means launch configuration template is already having the operating system information and it is also having the ALB information, the elastic load balance, the EBS information, the elastic block stored information. From this AMI only he is actually selecting this EBS volume. Okay. So in this EBS volume, like if I go back to the EC2 instance, if I go back to the EC2 instance and if I select instances and if I select WordPress, if I go to storage, can you see there is one 10 GB of storage, 10 GB of storage which is attached? Okay. So this 10 GB of storage, it is actually showing in the EC in the template. Okay, in the logical configuration template. So this is the 10 GB. If required, if you want to add another volume in this logical template, you can also add another volume. That's not a problem. Okay. You can create a new security group or you can select an existing security group. So these are the existing security groups which are already created, or you can create a new security group. Okay. Since it is already defined in the security group, so it will be having the SSH or SSH already defined. So let me just cancel it once. choose instance type. Let's type t2.micro. Okay, click on choose. This is the volume. If you want to add another volume, you can do it. If you want to create a new security group, you can do it. Already, since it's an Ubuntu based AMI that you have selected, so automatically SSH is having for all source, all subnets, all network, SSH is already allowed in the security group. Okay, you can create a new pair or you can select an existing pair. Okay, so if you want to select an existing pair, we can do that. We selected this, click on I acknowledge. Now click on create launch configuration. Okay, so now my launch configuration is created. So if you click on this, you can see these are the things which you have created. Okay, now let's go to the auto scaling group. Okay, let's go to the auto scaling group. This is the auto scaling group management console. Okay, click on create auto scaling group. Give the name of the auto scaling group like WordPress ASG. Okay, select the launch configuration template. Okay, now okay, so we can select this template WordPress LCT which we have just created. Click on next. Okay, now here we have to select the default VPC. Now we have to select the subnets. Like I told you in the other in case of defining an ALB, if a particular EC2 instance is actually defined within some other subnets, then and if you don't select that particular subnet, you will unable to find that EC2 instance. Same thing, if ALB is created into some other subnets, within some other subnets, if you don't select that particular subnet, you will be unable to find the required ALB. So for that reason, select all the subnets which is currently getting used. We have selected all the subnets. Click on next. Okay. Now, here is the options which you can do. If you don't want to create any load balancer, if you don't want to put your EC2 instance, auto scaled EC2 instance within a load balancer, that can be done. You can attach it to an existing load balancer, or you can also create a new load balancer from here, application and network. So auto scaling will only work in application and network load balancer. Okay, so let us choose that from the load balancer target group. So we have WordPress as the load balancer target group. It will be added under the application load balancer as an application load balancer, and whatever the EC2 instance that will be created, those EC2 instance will be automatically added under this particular target group. Okay. Next is the health check. You can do the health check based on the EC2 which is by default selected. You cannot disable it. You can also make it with the help of ALB. Okay. Now, health check grace period means what I can say is that, let me go back to my annotation mode. Yeah, let me go back to my annotation mode. Okay, say you have defined a particular EC2 instance out here. Okay, these are the two EC2 instances which you have declared. Okay, now what you want is that you want that another EC2 instance will be automatically scaled in if there is a certain criteria met. Maybe a CPU value is over 70%, another EC2 instance will be created. Okay, now we can define how many maximum EC2 instance, how many minimum EC2 instance, and what is the recommended EC2 instance which can be defined. We will see it in the next option. Okay. Now this health check grace period is like, suppose there are another two EC2 instance which are defined. Okay. Now if by any chance any one of the EC2 instance goes down, okay, auto scaling group will automatically launch another EC2 instance, because in my launch configuration template, or in my auto scaling group, we have defined a configuration is that minimum 2 auto scaling EC2 instance needs to be there. Okay, we will get it a much more clear idea when we will go into the next part. Okay, so let me just delete this for you. Okay, so you can define the maximum number of seconds it will wait for the health check to happen, and then it will recreate another EC2 instance, or another scaling instance that is defined in the auto scaling group. Okay, you can enable the group matrix collection, like you can enable the add CloudWatch to monitor this particular auto scaling group. Okay, now click on next. This is one of the most important part of a auto scaling group, based on which the auto scaling group will be defined. Now what is known as desired capacity? Desired capacity means this will be the number of instances which will be, by default auto scaling group will always run this number of instances. Okay, so like I told you, suppose you have defined desired capacity as 2. Okay, so once the ASG kicks in, it will start two EC2 instance instantly, because in the auto scaling group configuration you have defined that the desired instance will be 2. Okay, minimum instance will be 1, and maximum capacity will be 3. That means what will happen is that, suppose the auto scaling group has kicked off 2 instances. Okay, so if this instance goes down, okay, that means still it is within the value of minimum capacity. Okay, auto scaling group will not trigger another instance. But if any one of this instance goes down, okay, now the desired capacity is below the minimum capacity, then auto scaling group will automatically launch another 2 instances in order to meet the policy that you have defined in the auto scaling group. Is it clear? Any question on this, on the desired minimum and maximum?
So can you repeat again?
Okay. Desired capacity is the number of capacity which a auto scaling group will automatically kick in. Now if you have given 2, so it will, once I will click on, once the auto scaling group configuration is complete, we will see that automatically 2 instance of WordPress is actually created, because what you have said is that this is the desired capacity which I need. Again, you have defined that the minimum threshold value can be 1. Okay, so if any of this instance goes down, if one instance goes down, auto scaling group will not do anything, because still, since the minimum capacity is 1, this auto scaled instance is still there. But if this or this instance goes down, now the minimum capacity is, now the auto scaling group capacity is 0, whereas the defined minimum capacity is 1. So what it will do is that it will, then and there, it will define the 2 EC2 instance which you have defined as desired capacity. Okay, that means If 70% of load gets up, automatically these two instances will be there. Okay, and if 70% goes up, it will automatically try to deploy another instance, as the maximum capacity in a auto scaled group we have defined as 3. So total 5 servers will be there, or 4 servers will be there. One will be the primary server, two will be the auto scale desired instance, and another is the instances which is as per the maximum capacity. So if the maximum capacity is 4, then it will try to define 2 instances at once, and it will stop defining instances once the maximum capacity goes beyond. Is it clear now?
Okay, okay, sir. Sir, what is the this minimum capacity? There is the maximum capacity. If we are taking as a minimum capacity is 2, then this primary
So if you
then
define
what will
minimum
be going on?
capacity as 2, if you define minimum capacity as 2 and desired capacity as 2 as well, then what will happen
Yeah.
is that if these two instance goes down, okay, it will define 2 instance instantly, okay, and now since there are 4 instances which is there, what it will do is that if these 2 instance goes down, it will hit the minimum capacity, it will not do anything. If another instance goes down, okay, then it will again deploy 2 instances. Is it clear?
Okay, okay, sir. Then it is heated by the desired capacity.
Yeah, then it is hit by the desired capacity.
Then repeat it again. Yes.
So
Okay, thank you, sir.
So desired capacity is the capacity which is defined inside an auto scaling group, and auto scaling group will scale up to that desired capacity. That means 2. Okay. Minimum capacity is the particular capacity below which the auto scaling group will not go down. If for any reason the EC2 instance goes down the minimum capacity, auto scaling group will automatically trigger the number of capacity which is defined in the desired capacity.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir. Okay, thank you.
so let's define it as 1. Okay, now target tracking scaling policy. Here you can define what you want to define. We can define CPU utilization, we can define network ins and outs, and we can define application load balance request. Okay, so suppose the CPU utilization is 50. Now what is the seconds warm up before including in metric? Seconds warm up means once one instance is created, okay, this is the number of times that it will wait, so that suppose you can define as 300. So if you define 300, once a auto scale instance is created, it will wait for another 300 seconds. So what will happen is that suppose you have defined 2 auto scaling instances, okay, and even after defining 2 auto scaling instances, the load is not below 50%. This is the desired target value. The load is not below 50%, or maybe the load is not below the 70%. So it will wait for 300 seconds, because it can happen that this particular surge in the CPU utilization can be in a matter of seconds. Maybe this surge is because some application is running, and those application will be closed in a minute or two, and once the application is closed, the CPU utilization will go down. So for that reason, it will wait for a warm up period. So this is called as warm up period. After that, it will see, after this warm up period, what is the target capacity, or what is the scaling policy is defined. If it is below the scaling policy, it will not regenerate and another auto scaling instances. If it is above the target value, then it will again will deploy EC2 instances based on the desired capacity. Okay. Now next, click on next. Okay, so you can add notification. So there is one service which is known as SNS, or simple notification service, with the help of which the admins, the application owners or maybe the load balancer owners can understand that auto scaling auto scaling has created or initiated EC2 instances. You can configure the notification with the help of this. Click on next. You can click on add, click on next. Okay, so these are the configurations which are defined. Okay, now click on create auto scaling group. Okay, so it is now updating the capacity. Now once we create this auto scaling group, if I now go back to my target group and if I select WordPress ASG and go to targets, so let's this auto scaling group be created. So it is updating the capacity. It will take some time. So this is the desired capacity which we have defined. This is the minimum capacity which we have defined, and this is the maximum capacity which we have defined. If I go back to instances, can you see? 2 servers is already getting created. These 2 servers are already getting created. It is in pending state because in the desired capacity we have defined 2 servers, and even after these 2 servers are created, if I terminate these 2 servers, again automatically 2 servers will be created as per auto scaling group rule. So if I now go to the auto scaling group, okay, now go to the target group, let's see whether anything is added or not. Can you see? One instance is automatically added. So we haven't defined anything. We have only defined that the auto scaling group will create an instance inside the load balancer based on the auto scaling group and the launch configuration template configuration, and it starts doing it. Problem is, if you are doing an auto scaling group hands-on lab, and it will continue to do it unless and until the auto scaling group is actually removed from the load balancer. It will continue deploying things. So I can show you, like, see, these are two initializing, right? This one is done. Now see, I am terminating this. Shutting down in progress. Just wait and watch what happens.
While we're waiting on that, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, Daniel.
Is there a way to name those instances in the group from the group?
No, there is no name. There is
Okay.
no way because it only takes the instance ID.
Okay.
So just wait for the warm up period, and you can see that there will be another instance automatically created. Sorry, it will not create it because, can you tell me why it will not create it? Vijitha? I can keep on pressing refresh, but it will not create another instance. What is the reason?
The minimum value is 1.
Exactly. Minimum value is 1. So what it is seeing that though one instance is actually terminated, okay, but there is another instance is already running. Now see, since we have set the desired capacity as 2, okay, it has already started initializing another instance. This is the terminated instance, and this is the instance which is already there. This is the terminating instance, and he had started doing it. He is starting initializing another instance, and it will continue doing it unless and until we are removing all those instances, and we are removing the launch configuration template and the auto scaling group template from the load balancer. So for that reason, I am again telling you guys, if you are doing a auto scaling group hands-on lab, please remove the auto scaling group and the launch configuration template, because in a free tier, you only get 750 hours of access of all resources in AWS. Okay. Any question on this? Let me delete my auto scaling group, else my uh, subscription will get affected. Click on delete. Okay, now it is deleting it. I am going to my launch configuration. I am deleting the launch configuration, delete launch configuration. Everything is gone. I am going to my instances, and whatever the extra instances that is created, let me terminate all those instances. Click on terminate. Yeah, shutting down is in progress. Okay, so I can filter as instance state as shutting down, so it will show me those instances. Okay, is it clear now, guys? Any questions on auto scaling group?
That launch group that you deleted,
Yeah,
that was done before creating the auto scaling group, right?
yeah.
Launch configuration.
Launch configuration template is the main database or the main configuration file with the help of which all these instances are getting created.
Okay.
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 So guys, I will request you to practice this application load balancer and auto configuration, auto scaling group. So what you can do is create two instances, WordPress and Tomcat. Okay. Create two target groups and add the WordPress and Tomcat instance. Okay. Create ALB. Policy will be if someone is trying to access /app, it will be automatically redirected to Tomcat. Okay. And if someone is trying to access blog, it will be redirected to WordPress. Okay. And after that, once that is done, then you can start doing the auto scaling group. So let's take a break for 20 minutes. Okay. And during this time, you can create all those hands-on lab. If you are facing any issues during this creation, after the break, we can discuss on that. And if there is no issues, we can directly go to the Route 53 service. Is it fine, guys? So let's take a 20 minutes break. We will be back after the break. হ্যাঁ দাদা বলো।
আপনি কি আর নতুন কিছু করাবি?
এই তোমার কথা শোনা যাচ্ছে। হ্যাঁ রুট 53টা করাবো, রুট 53টা। হ্যাঁ তুমি নিচে ঘুরে এসো, রুট 53 জাস্ট 15 মিনিটস, 15 মিনিটস। হ্যাঁ ল্যাবটা আমি পরের দিকে করাচ্ছি, ল্যাবটা তুমি পরে করো, কোনো অসুবিধা কিছু নেই। তুমি ঘুরে চলে এসো, আমি প্রথমে রুট 53টা করিয়ে নেবো। করিয়ে নিয়ে আমি আজকে আসলে তাড়াতাড়ি, আমার বাড়িতেও তো পুজো আছে, আমাকে তাড়াতাড়ি র্যাপ আপ করতে হবে। ঠিক আছে, এমনি বুঝতে অসুবিধা হয়নি তো? হ্যাঁ 1 to 1 করে নেবে, কোনো অসুবিধা কিছু। একদম 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 একদম। ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে। নটার মধ্যে শেষ করতে পারছি, 2 মিনিটের একটা ব্রেক দিয়েছি, গলা শুকিয়ে যাচ্ছে না, কম বকতে হয়। ভালো লাগছে না। তাও কতগুলো টপিক বন্ধ করে দিয়েছি, আমি তোকে দেখাবো এলে। ঠিক আছে। video. Okay, so video started. Yeah. Now, so Route 53 service, what we call as Route 53 or R53 service. This service is actually used to connect customized domain. So maybe you have procured custom domains from GoDaddy or maybe from Google or from Azure or from AWS or from any other location. So Route 53 is actually a service which is used in order to connect your custom domain with that of your AWS. Okay, so maybe suppose you have created www dot something dot com, and now you want all your resources to use this customized domain. So what are the resources which can use the customized domain? We can have EC2 instance, we have S3, like we have already seen that we can deploy static websites in S3. So we can use those static websites and use our customized domain to define those static websites. You can define it with a ALB instance, okay? And you can also define it with our auto scaling group instance, okay? Now, just to give you, ask you one question. Do you guys need to know how FQDN? So you may be very much familiar with this particular word, FQDN. Are you guys familiar with this word?
Fully the domain name.
Fully qualified domain name. Okay.
Qualified domain.
Yeah.
Correct.
So what is this fully qualified domain name is? Like whatever the sites that you browse, like say www.google.com, www.microsoft.com, amazon.com. So all those domain names is having, means those web pages are actually hosted in some web servers, right? And those web servers is actually having some static or static public IP addresses. But it is not possible for a layman user or for a user who is accessing the internet. It is not possible to understand or not possible to remember all those IP addresses. So in order to ease the process of access, what we have done is that we have created customized web domain names. Sorry, www not. We have created domain names like say google.com. Okay. And with the help of the name servers, which is known as the NS records, we have added, I will not say add, but we have pointed this particular FQDN to a particular IP addresses. Okay. So we have taken this IP address. Now, since it's not possible for us to remember this IP addresses, so we have tagged those IP addresses in the DNS servers, and we have tagged this IP addresses with that of this fully qualified domain name. Okay. Now, do you guys want me to tell you the backend process? Like once you try www.google.com, how this, how your browser actually finds this google.com? Do you want to know that? If you don't want to know that, I can directly go to the Route 53 service.
If an overview can be given, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, fine.
Yes, sir. Please.
So in that case, suppose you have a particular machine out here, okay, and you are searching, say, cloudguardian.com. Okay, so you have given www.cloudguardian.com, and you have trying to access this particular site. Okay, so what happens? Cloudguardian.com. So what happens actually, once you type www.cloudguardian.com, this cloudguardian.com is actually hosted with some hosting providers. Like for cloudguardian.com, it is actually hosted in GoDaddy. Okay, so definitely there is some hosting providers which are giving you this domain name. Okay, once you type the cloudguardian.com in your browser, this particular request goes to your hosting provider. Now, how it goes to your hosting provider? Behind this cloudguardian.com, there is already an IP address which is set. Okay, and this IP address is actually stored in the global DNS records. Now, in order to access anything in the internet, you need to have a domain naming server defined. So if I want to see the domain naming server which are defined, and I can give ipconfig/all, you can see that these are the domain name servers which are defined 192.168.0.1. So this is the domain name. So any request which is going outside should first hit the gateway, okay, the default gateway. So default gateway is actually the door with the help of which your data can go outside your local network and go to the internet. Okay, it will go to the default gateway. Once the default gateway is reached, it will automatically get forwarded to the DNS server, and in the DNS server, this IP address is automatically defined, and it is saying that to find cloudguardian.com, you have to go to GoDaddy site. Okay, now once the packet goes to GoDaddy DNS server, okay, so GoDaddy DNS server is having a DNS database. Okay, we call it as a hosting database. So GoDaddy is having a DNS database where it is storing all the DNS names, it is storing all the FQDNs or all the domain names with the corresponding IP addresses. Okay, it finds the particular, that this is the particular IP address for cloudguardian.com. It hits that particular IP address, and if this IP address is situated somewhere in GoDaddy, or maybe it is situated in Microsoft, in Azure, it is situated in GCP, it is situated in AWS, the next hop count is automatically found from that particular DNS hosting providers. Okay. Now, if the hosting provider finds a next hop count as AWS, okay, so automatically this packet will be routed to AWS. Now, if I give an endpoint to cloudguardian.com, like cloudguardian.com/training, okay, now if I want this page to be there /training, so what it will do is that it will try to find this training web page in one of the EC2 instances. Okay, in one of the EC2 instances, or in one of the lambda functions, in one of the static web pages or S3 buckets where this static website is hosted. Once it finds the details of the static website from the AWS, it automatically hits the website and you can see the web page out here. Okay, so this is not as simple like the way I said. This is much more complicated. So if you want to know how a DNS is resolved within the internet, I can share you a particular link where you will see how the DNS is particular query. Okay, now Route53 service is actually a service which is used to connect your custom domain with that of AWS. Okay, so what we do in Route53, we create HZ, or what we call as hosted zones. Okay, we have to create a hosted zone in AWS. Once the hosted zone is created, okay, so once you create a hosted zone, AWS will give you some name servers. So name servers is actually those servers, once the domain name is actually hit in the AWS, this particular name servers will be searched with that particular domain name. Okay, from outside, these domain names are, these NS servers or the name servers are visible. Once a particular packet is coming to this to your Route53 service, It is first, it will be fetched by this name servers, and from the name servers it will be automatically triggered to the Route 53 service. Okay. Now, in order to do that, we need to find a particular domain name, right? We need to procure a domain name from GoDaddy or maybe from other site, okay? And then only we can add it. Now, in order to do that, you can use this particular website to create free domain names. I will share you the name of the website. It's freenom.com. Okay. So freenom.com is actually a particular website which gives you free DNS names. Okay. Just a minute, guys. এখানে কেন নিয়ে এলে ওকে? এক্ষুনি চেঁচামেচি করবে। আধ ঘন্টা তুমি রাখতে পারছো না ওখানে। ওকে, সো
It's time for bed.
there is some issue with my no, fine. So this is the web page from where you can actually find your, or you can actually create a free domain name. So let's sign in. Okay, then let's go and register a particular domain. Okay, let's see whether this domain name is available. Now you will not be able to find any domain with respect to .com, .edu, like that, because those are paid domains. Yeah, there are certain domains like start ends with .gk, .tk, you can find those. So let's try with AWS training. AWS training, click on check availability. এ দিয়ে দাও না, মিক্স ভেজ দিয়ে দাও না। তুমি কি ভাত খাবে? তাহলে বঙ্গমানিয়া থেকে অর্ডার দিয়ে দাও। হ্যাঁ দিয়ে দাও, দিয়ে দাও, ছানার ডালনা দিয়ে দাও। তরকা খেয়ে নেবো, তুমি ছানাটা খেয়ে নেবে। না আমার জন্য দিতে হবে, আমার জন্য তুমি পটলের তাহলে পটলের প্রিপারেশন দিও। Just a minute guys, I think there is some issue with the bandwidth. Okay, so here you can find that these are the domains. Now certain domains you can see the cross because maybe the servers are not available. So currently we have three free domains which are available. One is awstraining.ml, awstraining.ga, and awstraining.gq. Okay, so let's take this domain awstraining.gq, click on get it now. Okay, click on checkout. Make it 12 months free. Okay, so you can use this domain for the next 12 months. Okay, click on continue. Complete order. Complete order. So now you own the AWS training.gq. Okay, so we have a domain which is known as AWS training.gq. Okay, so where you can find this domain, go to services and click on my domains. You have AWS training.gq. Okay, now if you click on manage domain and then go to manage freenom DNS. Sorry, just a minute. Yeah, click on name servers. So here you will be seeing that use the default name servers, which is the freenom name servers. Now, if you click on use custom name servers, all these name servers are currently banned. So in order to do this, let's go to the Route53 service. Okay, and then go to hosted zone. So we have to first create a hosted zone. Click on create hosted zone. Okay, now this domain name should be the same which is given here. Okay, so copy this, give the name here. This will be a public hosted zone and click on create hosted zone. Okay, now once you create once you create a hosted zone, what you will find two records which two record. One is the name server records, another is the SOA. SOA is nothing but statement of authority. Okay, so you will find this name servers out here. Okay, click on this. These are the values which needs to be put in the name servers. So let's put these values in the name servers. Then Okay. Now click on change name server. Now, if you guys are lucky enough, okay, this name servers will reflect within 1 to 2 minutes. And if you guys are, and if your day is not good, then it can take actually more than 24 hours. So in order to check that whether the name servers are now activated with your AWS training.gq, let's go to a site which is known as dnschecker.org. dnschecker.org. Okay. Give the name of the domain name here. Sorry. So your domain name is awstraining.gq. Okay. Select NS record here. NS record stands for name servers, and click on search. So you can see that your NS records are now forwarded. Okay. So you can see if you go to the name servers. So we have 35410208. We have 35410208. Okay, so now your name servers are forwarded, and now this can be used in the with your Route 53 services. Okay. Now, in order to do it with the Route 53 service, suppose let me duplicate this. Suppose you want to do it with a EC2 instance. Okay, click on EC2. Let's see what are the servers that is up. Okay, now suppose this WordPress, you want to, this is the private DNS name. Okay, so for EC2 instance, you don't need to put the DNS name because it will be unable to find it with the help of the DNS name. Instead, you have to put it with the help of the public DNS addresses. Okay, so click on this public DNS address, then go back to your Route 53 and click on create record. Okay, in create record section, you have to create a host a record. Okay, so it will be aws.training.gq. That means what I want is that if someone tries to browse aws.training.gq, it will open the WordPress page. Okay, and in the value section, you have to give the IP address. Okay, click on create records. So now your aws training.gq is tagged with this. Let's see whether it works or not. Let's go to an incognito window. Let's try aws training.gq. ওকে বলো এখন হবে না, পরে বলে দাও, বলে দাও ওনার কল এখনো শেষ হয়নি, আপনি পরে আসুন, আপনার নাম্বার ওনার কাছে আছে, উনি ফোন করে নেবেন।
I think the winner just doesn't populate that area.
Yeah, I think it's still not populated because it is still showing me, though it is showing me that it is populated, but
Yeah, because I get an answer.
it is actually still.
Actually, the thing is that it is not that fast. Okay, DNS verification needs some time,
Need some time.
and the zone should be populated properly. Otherwise, you cannot open it from here.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So this is the way it will actually be created. Okay, you can also create, or you can also send it to particular alias. Okay, now in order to send it to a particular alias, suppose you want that if it is blog.aws.training.gq, okay, it will be forwarded to a, okay, let me try with this blog.aws.training.gq. Then let me copy this and give me this IP address. It will be a simple routing. Okay, add another record. Let me say with joomla.aws.training.gq. It will be alias, choose endpoint. Application, a classic load balancer. So where is my application load balancer created? Where is my target script created? Balancer is created on US is to A. Okay, it will be US is to A. Okay, now the load balancer is this one. You can see this is the name of the load balancer. Okay, ALB.Amazon AWS 4689533317. Here it is 46953. Yeah, 468953317. Here it is same 468953317. Okay, now click on create records. Okay, now if someone tries to access, let me just try with this. So it is just taking a time to populate. So what will happen is that once someone presses this, so either it will be redirected to, I think this will show you the same thing. Yeah, see. So blog.aws.training.gq, I am just trying with this and it is actually redirecting me to my WordPress site. Okay. So this is what Route 53 is all about. Apart from this, in Route 53, we can define different routing policies, which I will not cover up today. I will cover it up on next week. Okay. And Route 53 services, we will define a static website next week, and we will also see how we can define a S3 bucket. So I can show you the S3 bucket now only. So if we have, let me see if I have any S3 bucket. I don't think so. No, we don't have any bucket. So next week we will create one S3 bucket, we will host a static website, and then we will redirect that static website DNS with that of our custom DNS, custom domain. Okay. So this is the things that is for today. Okay. And for those who want to create or who want to do a hands-on lab, this is the lab settings which you can do. So let me share it with you guys. Okay. Apart from that, for Route 53, you can go to freenom.com. Okay, to create customized domain. Okay, then you can go to dnschecker.org to check whether your name servers are populated or not. Okay. Okay, and for the Route 53, create a custom domain. Okay, add the hosted zone in AWS R53 console. Okay, add the name servers in your custom domain. Okay, create a record for your WordPress EC2 instance. Try to access the same with the custom domain name. Okay, so these are the hands-on labs which you need to do. Okay, and if you face any issues in this hands-on labs, just ping me one-to-one or maybe in the Telegram group chat, and I can help you out. So today we are closing our session on this part only. Do you guys have any question?
Actually stuck.
Okay, no issue in that.
Thanks for
No issue in that. That's it for today, guys. Thank you. Have a nice next week, and we will again meet next Saturday and Sunday, which will be our last week of the session. Okay, and I will be sending you a new meeting request for Saturday and Sunday. And on Saturday, I have already told that we will be discussing about Route 53 routing policies. We will be discussing about VPCs, how we can create a private and a public VPC, how we can create a custom VPC. Okay, and after that, we will be working on the DMS service, that is database management service. We will see how we can do a database migration service. Sorry, my fault. Database migration service. We will see how we can migrate database from one database to another database. And then on Sunday, we will be merely working on, we will be doing a recap of the entire session that we have done for the last 6 weeks. And then we will be discussing how you can proceed with the examination. And I will be sharing you guys complete documentation of the entire AWS Solution Architect Associate exam, and as well as I will be sharing couple of questions or maybe a project kind of a thing. There will be 2 scenarios which will be defined, and just solve those scenarios and send me the screenshot of those scenarios in Telegram so that I can help you out if there is anything issues. Okay, thank you guys, have a good night, bye.